a community of young adults who are seeking Jesus together and seeking to live like Him right here, right now, in our current lives, in the Beaverton, Hillsborough, Portland, Tigard, wherever you're at, that whole area. So, yeah, we're learning what it means to be Jesus followers right here, right now, where we live, and faithfully follow Him. And yeah, so and we do it in community, which is essential in the life of Jesus. So, couple of things before we get into our time together talking about money as followers of Jesus. Um, the first thing is this: next Wednesday, we have a guest speaker named Pastor Mark Nicholas. He oversees our outreach ministries here at the church. And so I'm really excited for us to hear from him. And he's going to be talking a little bit about outreach and missions and particularly what we've got going on here at the church. And so, yeah, I figured that would be a great way to kind of like close off our conversation on money and the series on money and figuring out what it means to be faithful followers of Jesus, even with whatever we have. All right. Second thing is this. So if you were not here last Sunday, we had Pastor Bostern Brady become officially appointed as our lead pastor, which is amazing, and super excited about that. And so if you're here and you're kind of like, I'm not sure how I feel about like, women who are in, pastoral leadership positions, just know you are loved. You are loved. You're welcomed here. You can have disagreements. We really hold to that. The biblical stance is equality of men and women. This isn't like a stance of feminism. This is really like hey, we see that men and women are equal, and they are used by Jesus to spread His gospel in amazing ways. If you have questions about that, I'd be very happy to be a dialogue partner with you in that. I'm not going to do your homework for you. I recommend you do some study, but I can help you alongside that journey. So, yeah, all right. So that being said, I want to go from talking about potentially like a divisive theological position such as like women in senior pastor positions to something a little less controversial, money. All right. So we're going to discuss money and particularly what it means to be followers of Jesus and how to like faithfully steward the finances we have been entrusted with. Now, a few weeks back, I talked about kind of like 4 postures when it comes to money. All right. In our day and age right here, right now, in a 21st century American capitalistic society. All right. The first posture with money is you work the system. By this means kind of like hustle culture. It's all about, you've got that side gig and that other side gig, and it's all about like accumulating money, and you're really working the system, and so much of your identity is tied up to what you have, your net worth or your business, whatever it is. So that's working the system. The second posture is you despise the system. You're like, man, the economic system in this country is rigged. It's, it keeps the rich rich, it keeps the poor poor, and it is a screwed up system, and I despise it. And that's kind of like your like 10 years ago, we had the Occupy Wall Street movement and all of that. And so that would be kind of the despise the system posture. Now, some of us may end up in this posture, which is ignore the system. You're just kind of like, hey, you know what? My identity is not really in my work, but also I don't really think too much about economic injustices in the country and all of that. So you know what? I just work my job, clock in, clock out, and then I get my paycheck. And I just, I don't really have much vision for how I could use my finances for kingdom advancement. All right. My argument, my ask is that we would lean into this fourth posture, and that is this: a faithful presence within the system, within this system that we find ourselves in. What does it look like to be a faithful presence, to be followers of Jesus, and to steward our finances well? Because ultimately, our finances are not our own. We are merely managers of what has been entrusted to us by God. Our possessions, our finances, they are not our own. They are for us to wisely, by the guidance of God's Spirit and in community, in discernment with community, uh, figuring out how to best steward our finances. So that's the fourth posture: being a faithful presence within the system, recognizing that our finances are not our own. They are entrusted to us to use for kingdom purposes. That means, paying off debt, saving for retirement, home, all that, but also having an eye for needs in the community, needs around you, such as like friends or family who are in financial situations, and even needs that are outside of our community, like, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza or in the Sudan or Congo, and just being like, okay, Lord, with what I have, how can I join in what you're already up to in this world? All right. Um, okay, so with that said, with that as kind of like our foundational points, we're seeking to be a faithful presence, to be followers of Jesus, and be a faithful presence with our finances. Um, I want to just throw this out there to you, and maybe this is not new to you, but maybe you hear this and it's a little jarring. Okay, so let's just get this out of the way. We, whether we are aware of this or not, we are rich. We are rich by global standards. Now you're probably thinking like, David, you haven't seen like my income and expense, situation. All right, okay, I hear you, but when we think about it globally, we are rich. So the Economist has a chart that highlights where the U.S. is at based on like, GDP and adjusted for cost difference and adjusted for hours worked. And so with that, you could see that the U.S., with the exception of maybe like 6 countries, is in a far better financial situation. American is in a far better financial position than the majority of the world. So, with that being said, we are rich. Therefore, what do we do with that? Now, there are a couple of temptations to when it comes to those who are rich. Okay, I'm not necessarily saying like people's temptations, but rather like when we think of rich people, there are two temptations. All right. The first is to demonize the rich. This is demonizing the rich. This is kind of like a cultural Marxism, essentially, of like the rich are evil, the rich are what's wrong with the world. The way we fix the problems of the world, it's a quick fix, simple, easy solution, is tax the most wealthy and redistribute and make everyone equal. All right. The driving value of this is equality. And equality is a good thing. Yes, yes, and amen to equality. But the driving value of demonizing the rich is equality. We don't want people to be higher than others. All right. Now, the other temptation is to elevate the rich. This is the rich are to be celebrated and elevated. They are the goal. This is expressed in capitalism. And the key value of this is freedom. We want ultimate freedom. The goal is to, with our freedom, accumulate so much wealth that we can then buy more freedom. Equality with others, that's not really on the horizon. It's rather about freedom. And so with that said, with those temptations, I do want to highlight that there is a bit of a tension to manage. There's a Jewish scholar and psychologist who is a survivor of the Holocaust. His name is Viktor Frankl. If ever you get a chance to read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, it is profound. All right, it's a profound book, Man's Search for Meaning. But Viktor Frankl has this quote where he says he laments that the U.S. has the Statue of Liberty on the East Coast, but not the Statue of Responsibility on the West Coast. What could it look like to, as followers of Jesus, celebrate liberty, celebrate freedom, but also recognize responsibility, our responsibility to create a world where there is equality, where there is not this wealth gap. All right. So with all this said, we, as followers of Jesus, when we place our trust in Jesus, we are brought into a new family, the family of God. God is our Father, Jesus Christ, our older brother. We are invited into this new family. But with new family, a family where there is equality, no one is better than the other. With this new family where there is equality, there's also new responsibilities. And I'm going to quote this person at length, so bear with me on this. There's a scholar, her name's Ada Spencer, and she says this: few people consider themselves rich. However, statistically, most of us in developed countries are rich if we consider that at least 80% of humans live on less than $10 a day. If we begin with this basis, then we are indeed rich. So what should we do about it? First, and she pulls this from the text that we're going to read in a few minutes. The first is maintain a balance of thanksgiving and generosity. Enjoy God's gifts of marriage and material blessings while working out a budget to assist others to enjoy these too. Second, be satisfied with the basic necessities of food, clothing, and shelter. Beware of simply wanting what others have or others expect you to have. Friends, I drive a Prius, and I am very content with my Prius. You may drive around in a nicer car than me. I can say that I am content. However, my weakness is when I see someone with much nicer sneakers than me, and then there's a covetousness in my heart. So confession time. Here we go. But we all have our own temptations like that. So anyways, third, work on getting your security from God, not wealth, and seek to please God in words and actions. So this is just kind of a pulling from 1 Timothy chapter 6, which we're going to read individually in a few minutes. These principles are pulled from that text, and they are just a helpful guide for us as followers of Jesus who are rich to recognize and to be like, okay, how do I faithfully follow Jesus as someone who has means? Now, so before we go into table discussion, I do want to give a story from the book of Acts. It's one of those stories that's just like you can skip over it and not really realize anything interesting about it. But it is interesting, and I want us to really use our imagination to get into the story and allow this story to shape us and to teach us how we can, as Christians who have possessions, who are well off financially, how do we faithfully follow Jesus? All right. So this is a woman named Tabitha. It is the days of the early church. So go to Acts chapter 9. Acts chapter 9. Starting in verse 36, but also have your finger at 1 Timothy chapter 6, because we're going to go there during small group time. All right. So so Acts chapter 9, verse 36. Now there was in Joppa a disciple named Tabitha, which translated means Dorcas, which, I mean, that's kind of a weird, like, that would be an unfortunate unfortunate name to be named Dorcas. But you know what? We're just going to call her Tabitha. That sounds nicer. I don't know. She was full of good works and acts of charity. Pay attention to that. She was full of good works and acts of charity. In those days, she became ill and died. And when they had washed her and laid her in an upper room, since since Lydda was near Joppa, the disciples, hearing that Peter was there, sent two men to him, urging him, "Please come to us without delay." So Peter rose and went with them. And when he arrived, they took him to the upper room. All the widows stood beside him, weeping and showing tunics and other garments that Dorcas made while she was with them. But Peter put them outside and knelt down and prayed. And turning to the body, he said, "Tabitha, arise." And she opened her eyes, and when she saw Peter, she sat up. And he gave her his hand and raised her up. Then, calling the saints and the widows, he presented her alive. And it became known throughout all Joppa, and many believed in the Lord. And he stayed in Joppa for many days with one Simon, a tanner. So, a couple of things to be aware of. So Tabitha is someone who has means. She has finances. However, she is rich in charity and good deeds. She isn't someone who's just like, "Oh, I'm well off financially, so I'm just going to donate some money, but not really like serve people, not really do good deeds." She gives of her finances and she does good deeds. What does she do? She makes garments for widows. Widows in those days were the most vulnerable of society. They had no rights. They had, in a patriarchal society in those days, if you are a widow, you are not connected to a male figure, then you have no rights, you have no possessions, you have no property. And Tabitha, providing for those who are vulnerable, makes garments. They surround her body as if they're like, "Man, we are lamenting that this woman who gave us these garments has died." Also, scholars point out that Tabitha being laid in the upper room is a a pretty substantial property. Those who were well off, those who were wealthy, were in homes that had upper rooms. So here is a woman who is generous with her finances and generous in good deeds. She is well off. She is a woman of means. However, she is a disciple who is using her gifts, using her finances, using her abilities to serve the vulnerable, to provide for those who are most vulnerable. So, with that in mind, with that story kind of shaping our imagination, here's what we're going to do. We're going to spend probably like 20-25 minutes in table discussion time. However, before that, I want us to go to 1 Timothy chapter 6, starting in verse 17 and going to 19, so 3 verses. Or if you want to start in verse 10, you can do that too. But we're going to spend 5 minutes just reading silently to ourselves this passage. And as we are reading, I want you to ask God, "Lord, what do I need to pay attention to? What are you speaking to my heart right here, right now?" After we spend some time in reading this passage, I'm going to invite us to have some table discussion time, and we're going to ask 3 questions. What stands out to you in the passage? What is God inviting you to do? And why could this be a step towards a life of deeper joy? And I truly believe that when we take these invitations from God in the scriptures, it's a life of deeper joy, even if it means sacrifice. All right. So, yeah, let's go to 1 Timothy chapter 6, and let's spend a few minutes reading that. So come, Holy Spirit, would you open our eyes? Open our eyes to what we need to see. Open our eyes to what you want to show us in this passage. Would you shape our imagination with how we are to live our lives as those who are rich, but not finding our security, our identity, and our riches, but finding our security and identity in you. Lord, would you speak to us through this? Okay, give it like 30 seconds. All right, so in your table groups, go ahead and discuss amongst yourselves um, these questions. What stands out to you? What is God inviting you into? And why could this be a step towards a life of deeper joy? Um, but also, if you're like, man, I don't really know anyone at my table, everyone's a stranger, feel free to just have a bit of like an icebreaker, such as like, if you were to it, if you had all the money in the world, what would you spend it on, or something like that? So related to what we're talking about. Or even just like, where would you like to go for a vacation one day? Um, all right, so let's spend like the next 20, 25 minutes or so discussing. Each table has kind of like a table leader, so when in doubt, just look at them, and they will guide you in the right direction. All right, go.